Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six, brought to us by LJN. Return of the Sinister Six has Spider-Man battling through 6 different levels and at the end taking on one of the members of the Sinister Six, a group of some of Spider-Man's most vicious foes that he has battled since almost the beginning. While overall most of the levels are going to be pretty straightforward, there are a couple of levels that you do need to find a particular item in order to advance in a stage. The overall control of the game can be very stiff, as well as it takes a lot to get used to, having multiple different functions all using the same button. So here we go with Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six for the NES. When the game starts up, you're greeted with the main title screen, and if you wait for a little while, it will go to a brief story synopsis, and once you also press start at the beginning of the game, it will also give you the same story synopsis. I feel what hurts this game the most is its overall presentation. The graphics, while of course being on the NES can't be too spectacular, I do think they are lacking in departments, as well as they could have definitely added more story, as well as maybe some more cutscenes and other elements of the Spider-Man lore. After the opening storyline, we then get to probably my favorite part about the game, the level introductions, showing Spider-Man and the particular villain, and then we jump into the actual level. You will find out rather quickly just how clunky the controls can be at times. While it is fun to do somersaults in the air as Spider-Man, one of the biggest problems with the game is whatever direction you're facing is the only direction you can jump. You can't jump while facing right and be able to hold back and actually move backwards. You won't move at all. And because of this, can sometimes lead to some frustrating areas. For the most part in the game, avoid the enemies. You don't have a whole lot of health, as you can see with your health bar on the left side of the screen represented by the 4 red squares. Boss's health is also represented, but with different colored squares. The thing about this is, you do lose health gradually, but it can take sometimes 2 or 3 hits before losing a particular square. The same goes of course for the bosses. Since the somersault is actually really fun to jump through enemies, that's what I'm going to spend most of my time doing while running through the particular levels. You have 2 different types of attacks as Spider-Man. You have a straight up punch that you hold the attack button to do, and then if you tap the button, you'll do the flying kick. Because of this alone, the game can definitely be difficult to take out enemies when you want to. The kick will end up going through them when you actually want to stand there and just straight up punch them. In this area, we have to explore a little bit in order to find an item before we're able to get to the exit of the area. Spider-Man can use his webbing in the game, however, you can always use the swinging web, but to use web as a projectile, you'll have to pick up webbing that's sitting on the ground. To use the actual swinging web can be a real pain. Using the same button you use to attack while also jumping can usually lead to either not using it at all, or using it when you don't want to. Down here we have to take out the enemy right by the door, and it unlocks the door so we can go to the boss battle. The first boss, of course, is Electro that we saw in the level's introduction. First, you have to turn off the power switch on the right side, which is represented by the lever, and once you do that, he will start flying around the room. Eventually, he'll come up just a little bit or float above you, and when he comes down to your level will be the opportunity to hit him. When he stays too far down on the bottom part of the screen, move up so that he'll actually float up as well, sometimes having to jump up straight in the air in order to lure him out. Overall, not a tough boss, but it definitely takes used to trying to manipulate him to come up towards you. The weird thing about this game is sometimes when you defeat a boss or enemy, they will explode, while other times they will just fall down. The second level of the game has us searching for Sandman, the next member of the Sinister Six. While 5 of the original members of the Sinister Six are included, Kraven the Hunter is replaced by Hobgoblin. The storyline for the game takes place during the story arc known as The Return of the Sinister Six, which took place between Amazing Spider-Man issues 334 and 339. Hobgoblin replaces Kraven after Kraven originally had committed suicide, though like many comic book characters, he would be resurrected not too long after. And if you're wondering, the Hobgoblin included in this game is based off of Jason McIndale, who originally also was known as Jack-O-Lantern. There has been many people who have played Hobgoblin over the year, including even Harry Osborn. In this one, we have to jump up here and we're going to collect the webbing from this side and then go over to the left side, and now we're picking up the detonator. We had just picked up the bomb a little bit earlier on. You need the bomb and the detonator in order to remove a box that we're going to be exploding in a little bit in order to get to the actual boss battle. As you'll notice, there are green boxes in the game that when you jump on them, they will blow up and you can actually bounce off of them, or sometimes will make your path a little bit more difficult to get across, though there's not many of this in the game. After working our way through this little bit of a labyrinth, we'll eventually come to this red box at the top, in which case Spider-Man will automatically drop off the TNT, then we're going to head to the left, drop off the detonator, and explode the box. It's now time to battle the Sandman. Sandman will immediately go into the ground on the bottom part of the screen, and then reappear wherever you are. There's a couple of different strategies, but what I usually like to do on some of the bosses that stand straight up is to do the main punch to them, and then jump through them when they're getting ready to attack, especially on Doc Ock, the last boss of the game we'll be fighting. Overall though, a pretty simple fight, and once Sandman's done, we've completed level 2, and move on to 3, which has us hunting for Mysterio. The third level of the game is actually probably the most complicated level overall. There's a bunch of different doors that we can go into that take us to a couple of different areas. Though even with that, and being a bit of a maze, it's still a pretty simple level to explore. In the first room, we're going to head all the way over to the right and enter this door here. Now, I'm not sure on what the random enemies, other than the guys just firing at you, really are supposed to represent. You'll have what looks like pieces of paper floating downwards, and when they reach the bottom, they end up exploding. You'll have flying bat-like bird enemies that are green flying overhead, and when they see you, they dart immediately towards you. And then you also have, in this level, these guys with claw-like arms that move towards you and try to attack. In order to enter the next room, which is filled with what I assume is radiation, we need these glasses over here to the left. Pick up the glasses, and then you want to head up here and enter this door. The color alone of this room is weird enough, and our goal is to first come over to the right side, and we're going to be picking up some webbing. Picking up the webbing technically is overall optional, but I at least want to showcase where most of it was in the game. Then we're going to backtrack past the door we came into this room, and then we'll have to work our way around. Using some key jumps that I'm able to, I can get around a lot of the enemies during this part. The only thing about this part that is difficult, though, is that some of the enemies are difficult to see because of the coloring. But we want to enter the door in the lower left, in which case, finally, the color returns normal in the next room. Here, watch out for all the bombs that are floating down from the top, and then you want to do a high jump by holding up and jump to get up here. You can also use some swinging with the web to swing around until you eventually make it to that platform. Then, run past a couple more of those weird claw-like monsters, and then into the lower right door in order to enter the boss battle with Mysterio. Now, Mysterio is the first of the bosses in the game that has multiple different battles with him. We're going to start off with one here, and once you defeat him, you'll see the wall in the lower right corner destroy, and then we'll be able to go through. The strategy, though, like most of the bosses in the game, is pretty much just normally attacking them. Here, I'm just going to do a combo of the big strong punch, as well as the kick, mixing them up in order to back Mysterio away before he's able to get his own attacks off. After destroying all his health, that clone of Mysterio will disappear, and we can move on to the next one. Over here to the left side, I inch towards where Mysterio is going to appear, and then battle the last one. And once he's done, he'll fall over, and we move on to the next level of the game. From here on out, the 3 levels that are left are completely straightforward, and they're only going to take a few seconds to get through because of that. This level, we're going to be battling the Vulture. Now, Vulture actually is flying through the entire stage consistently, repeatedly, somehow, going to the left side and then reappearing from the right, dropping missiles on us the whole time that explode. The shrapnel as well as the missiles can damage you, and so our goal is to just try to avoid it altogether while jumping straight through all the other normal enemies. There are a few instances where you may need to backtrack a couple of steps in order to avoid one of them landing directly on you. When you make it over here, we're going to now battle Vulture himself. I recommend going all the way to the far right side and standing on this platform. Not only can you get some webbing to help you out, even though I don't think you can really hit Vulture while he's in the air. What you're basically waiting for is Vulture to keep flying back and forth. Eventually, sometimes Vulture falls down to the ground, just landing for a second, and when he does, you can time a nice kick or punch directly to him in order to drain some of his health. This is probably the longest battle overall because you're relying on waiting for Vulture to come down towards you, but it's still pretty darn easy. This game was not only released on the NES, but actually was also released on the Sega Master System, and then also on the Sega Game Gear, with the Master System and Game Gear versions being pretty much identical, with the exception, of course, of the Game Gear being a little bit more zoomed in. There are some differences between them, besides, of course, better graphics being on the Master System. The Master System version is also easier. Some enemies are taken out, and some jumps are a little bit redesigned to make the game a little bit easier. But since I don't find the game too difficult overall, that one ends up being a cakewalk. The next level of the game, well, has us tracking down the Hobgoblin. Introduced in this level is this crazed maniac guy who throws clubs or bottles at you, no matter if you're up close or far away. Just like all the other enemies we've been fighting, I'm going to jump over him, in which case he will then launch his projectile, so usually I try to just let it arc over my head before continuing the run. There's also bats, and Hobgoblin himself will appear in the level to fire a few lasers at you, but usually he's pretty low to the ground, and you can just jump over his head. When you reach the end, it's Hobgoblin battle, which this boss battle ends up being really easy if you can get him stuck in a loop. Get him down to the bottom, and every time you deliver a hit, he'll go slightly off screen. But if you time it, you can actually still hit him even when he's off screen, hitting him repeatedly over and over again until all his health is drained, and you move on to the next level. Yep, that quick, we're already now to the final stage of the game, level 6, and having us tracking down Doc Ock this time. You can see, while the level is different, it's very similar to the other stages we've been going through with the trees and fences in the background. There's a lot of stuff coming our way. The flying green bat things that see us, there's cannons that pop out of the ground that we're going to try to avoid, though you can destroy them with a nicely timed punch, as well as the other enemies we face throughout the entire game. However, running straight through the levels without really minding the enemies is pretty easy, except here you do want to do a big jump off the fence to avoid all 3 missiles coming at you right before you get to the final boss fight. For Doc Ock, he's just like Mysterio, as you have to fight him multiple times. The strategy though is he can actually do damage to you, so what I like to do is deliver 3 big punches and then do a flying kick through him. So hold in the attack button 3 times and then just mash it real quick in order to jump through him. If you time this right, you'll be able to avoid his hit, which does have a huge hit radius. So be sure to step a few steps away from him instead of being right up behind him, as he can still hit you even if he's not facing you with his attack. Once you knock him over for the last time, his glasses fly off, and you have the ending to Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six. And yep, this is it. A single screen, the Sinister Six defeat it looking like they're sitting around a campfire down below, and Spider-Man standing triumphant over top. Then it goes back to the title screen and you can start the game all over again. But with that, it's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.